Here's the entire evolution of SpongeBob SquarePants. From a sketch in a marine lab to movies, spin-offs, and 25 years under the sea. Let's get into it. The origins, 1984 to 1996. Before SpongeBob ever flipped a Krabby Patty, he was just an idea in a marine biology classroom. In 1984, Steven Hillenburg was a young teacher at the Orange County Marine Institute in California. His job was to help children understand life in the intertidal zone, the strange coastal strip where land meets sea. Instead of boring diagrams, he decided to create something more memorable, a comic book called The Intertidal Zone. The comic featured talking sea creatures that lived in tide pools. Among them was a small, cheerful sponge wearing sunglasses named Bob the Sponge. This version wasn't square or even yellow. He was a natural sea sponge, more round and lumpy. Still, his personality was already there, optimistic, quirky, and unreasonably enthusiastic about everything. Hillenburg tried to get the comic published, but no one was interested. Publishers said it was too educational, which is an industry term for kids will hate it. So he shelved it. For a while, he focused on his teaching job, but his love for drawing wouldn't go away. Eventually, he decided to take a gamble. He left his steady career to study animation at the California Institute of the Arts in 1987, the same school responsible for producing half of Disney's animators. There, he created experimental short films like Wormholes and The Green Beret, earning a reputation for blending science with surreal humor. This caught the attention of Nickelodeon, who were producing a strange and beloved cartoon called Rocko's Modern Life. In 1993, Hillenburg joined the team as a director, writer, and storyboard artist. The show's weird humor, bright visuals, and offbeat tone would heavily influence his later creation. When Rocko's Modern Life ended in 1996, Hillenburg revisited his old tide pool comic. What if those creatures came to life as animated characters? What if Bob the Sponge became the center of a world filled with oddball sea life? Out of that question came a new concept, a sponge living in a pineapple under the sea. He titled the project SpongeBoy Ahoy! The Birth of SpongeBob SquarePants, 1997 to 1999. With Rocko's Modern Life wrapped up, Steven Hillenburg finally had time to build his own show. Using his old comic as the foundation, he began sketching a cast of underwater misfits. A crab who ran a fast food restaurant, a grumpy octopus neighbor, a starfish best friend, and a sponge who just wouldn't quit smiling. That sponge was first called SpongeBoy. He wore a white shirt, red tie, and square brown pants, the same outfit we know today. But there was a small problem. A cleaning product company already owned the name SpongeBoy. Rather than risk legal chaos over a kitchen sponge, Hillenburg swapped the name to SpongeBob SquarePants. He said he wanted sponge to stay in the name so no one would confuse the character for a block of cheese, something Nickelodeon executives genuinely worried about. Hillenburg's next step was to build a pilot. He reunited much of his Rocko's Modern Life crew and created the test episode Help Wanted. It introduced SpongeBob applying for a job at the Krusty Krab and winning it through sheer chaos. Tom Kenny, who had voiced Heifer the cow on Rocko's, was brought in to voice SpongeBob, combining high-pitched energy with the innocence of a 5-year-old who just drank 10 espressos. When Hillenburg pitched the show to Nickelodeon executives, they didn't know what to think. A polite square sponge who works in fast food and lives under the sea wasn't exactly a proven formula. But once they saw the pilot, they couldn't stop laughing. As one Nickelodeon executive later said, "We were confused, but we were laughing the entire time." The network officially greenlit the series and production began. Hillenburg wanted SpongeBob to be timeless, visually simple, emotionally universal, and free of topical humor. He drew inspiration from old slapstick comedians like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, mixing physical gags with childlike wonder. Finally, on May 1st, 1999, Nickelodeon premiered SpongeBob SquarePants. The pilot aired right after the Kids' Choice Awards, instantly reaching millions. The reactions were immediate. Kids loved the colorful absurdity, adults enjoyed the hidden wit, and Nickelodeon realized they had a new mascot on their hands. By the end of that year, the sponge who once lived only in a marine biologist's sketchbook had officially taken over pop culture. The Golden Age and Early Animation Style, 1999 to 2004. The first 3 seasons of SpongeBob SquarePants are widely considered its golden era, the period where everything clicked. The writing was clever, the humor absurd yet relatable, and the animation perfectly imperfect. It was the sweet spot before technology polished away the rough edges that made early episodes so charming. In Season 1, every frame was hand-drawn on animation cells, just like the classic cartoons of the mid-20th century. Each movement was painted and photographed frame by frame, giving it a slightly gritty texture. The colors were softer and the outlines uneven, but that was the beauty of it. SpongeBob looked alive, not computer-generated. His emotions stretched and squashed in exaggerated ways that echoed Looney Tunes, Popeye, and Tom and Jerry. By Season 2, Nickelodeon shifted to digital ink and paint. The characters now had cleaner lines, brighter tones, and smoother transitions. SpongeBob's design was subtly tweaked. His eyes were made larger, his shape rounder, and his face slightly softer to make him look more approachable. Despite the changes, the humor stayed intact. Surreal, fast-paced, and surprisingly mature underneath the nonsense. Season 3 became the peak of the series' creativity. Episodes like Chocolate with Nuts, No Weenies Allowed, and the camping episode defined the show's legacy. The writing team, including Paul Tibbitt and Aaron Springer, hit a balance between slapstick chaos and sharp character moments. SpongeBob's innocence contrasted perfectly with Squidward's cynicism, Patrick's idiocy, and Mr. Krabs' greed. It was an ensemble that worked on every level. Visually, the animation style kept evolving without losing its handmade feel. Backgrounds became more detailed. Muted sea greens, coral reds, and textured sand tones. While the characters remained bright and bold in the foreground, the contrast helped Bikini Bottom feel alive, not sterile. During this time, SpongeBob exploded into a cultural phenomenon. Merchandising flooded the market: lunchboxes, plush toys, cereals, board games, even toothbrushes. It wasn't just a show anymore, it was a brand worth billions. Hillenburg was shocked by how quickly it took off, later saying, "I figured it would have a small cult following. It just got big. It's a big, weird little show." The success led Nickelodeon to push for a feature film. Hillenburg agreed, but with a catch. The movie would serve as the final chapter. He believed the story had reached its natural end, and SpongeBob deserved to go out on a high. That decision led directly to the next major milestone, the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, 2004. The movie era and Hillenburg's exit, 2004 to 2005. By 2004, SpongeBob SquarePants had become Nickelodeon's biggest success. So when Steven Hillenburg proposed a theatrical film as the perfect way to end the series, the network didn't hesitate. The result was the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, released in November of that year. A loud, ambitious, and visually spectacular send-off that marked the peak of SpongeBob's first life cycle. With a much larger budget, the film's animation took a major leap. Everything was cleaner, sharper, and more cinematic. The ocean backgrounds shimmered with light gradients, and the colors were almost unnaturally vivid. SpongeBob himself was redrawn with straighter edges and higher contrast, giving him a slightly angular appearance compared to the softer, rounder design of earlier seasons. The plot followed SpongeBob and Patrick on a quest to recover King Neptune's stolen crown, an adventure that took them across deserts, biker bars, and even the human world. The writing team managed to keep the absurd energy of the show while delivering something that felt like a proper finale. Hillenburg viewed it as SpongeBob's graduation, the final lesson in optimism and courage. Behind the scenes, however, Nickelodeon had no intention of letting the sponge retire. The movie's box office success, hundreds of millions in worldwide revenue, proved SpongeBob was far too profitable to stop. When Hillenburg told the studio he planned to end the series, executives politely disagreed. So, after the movie's release, Hillenburg stepped away from day-to-day production. He stayed on paper as an executive producer, but his creative input faded. The animation team he'd built over the years, many of whom understood the show's subtle tone, also began to leave. Taking over the role of showrunner was Paul Tibbitt, one of the writers from the earlier seasons. The transition marked a clear divide in SpongeBob's history, before the movie and after the movie. Hillenburg later said, "I thought they would respect that my contribution was important, but boy, was I wrong." From this point on, the series would continue without its creator, and fans would soon notice the difference. The post-Hillenburg decline, 2005 to 2012. After the 2004 movie, SpongeBob returned to TV, but it wasn't quite the same SpongeBob. With Steven Hillenburg gone from daily production, the tone and animation of the show began to drift. Writer Paul Tibbitt took over as showrunner, and Nickelodeon wanted to freshen things up for a younger audience. That decision would define the show's most divisive era. The fourth season arrived in 2005 with noticeable changes. SpongeBob's pupils were larger, his cheeks puffier, and his nose slightly longer. Everything looked cleaner, glossier, and, depending who you ask, too perfect. Gone were the gritty outlines and muted tones of the early days. Now the sea looked neon, like someone had turned up the saturation knob on Bikini Bottom. But the biggest shift wasn't visual, it was tonal. SpongeBob's innocence became immaturity. The curious optimist turned into a hyperactive child. Patrick's simple-minded charm devolved into full-blown stupidity. Mr. Krabs went from greedy to psychotic about money. Even Squidward, once a relatable cynic, became permanently bitter. The character depth that balanced the chaos was gone, replaced with louder jokes and faster pacing. By season 5, the animation process changed again. The team started using digital tablets, specifically Wacom setups, for the entire workflow. While this made production faster and cheaper, it also flattened the art style. Characters moved stiffly and backgrounds lost their organic texture. Many longtime animators called it the cereal box era because SpongeBob looked less like a living sponge and more like a cardboard cutout with limbs. The humor followed suit. Where early seasons thrived on timing and absurdity, these years relied on gross-out gags and yelling. The subtle emotional beats like SpongeBob's kindness or Squidward's quiet misery were replaced by endless screaming and slapstick fans, coined a term for this exaggerated evolution, flanderization. Borrowed from The Simpsons, it described when a character becomes a parody of their defining traits. Through seasons 6 to 8, the decline continued. Designs grew rounder and cuter to appeal to younger children, while storylines lost their clever, adult-friendly undercurrent. SpongeBob's laughter, once contagious, became grating. By 2010, much of the fan base agreed. The show had lost its magic. Behind the scenes, Nickelodeon didn't seem to mind. Ratings were still high, merchandise sales were enormous, and SpongeBob had become a global mascot. But among critics and fans, this period was known as the show's dark age, a time when the heart of Bikini Bottom seemed to have sunk. The revival and return of Hillenburg, 2014 to 2017. After nearly a decade of creative decline, Nickelodeon realized something had to change. SpongeBob was still profitable, but the show had lost its spark. The solution came in the form of a long-awaited comeback, and the return of the man who started it all. In 2015, the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, hit cinemas. For the first time since 2004, Steven Hillenburg was directly involved, writing the story and overseeing production. His return wasn't just symbolic, it completely revitalized the franchise. The movie mixed 2D animation, 3D CGI, and live action, showing SpongeBob and his friends emerging into the human world as superhero versions of themselves. But beneath the gimmicks, the film's real magic came from restoring the show's original tone, innocent chaos rather than forced stupidity. SpongeBob was curious again, Patrick was lovably clueless rather than brain-dead, and Squidward regained some humanity. Visually, the film introduced a refreshed design that carried over into the series. SpongeBob's shape became rounder and smoother, his eyes slightly smaller, and his colors softer. The outlines were refined but not over-sharp, striking a middle ground between the hand-drawn warmth of early seasons and the polished look of modern animation. The success of Sponge Out of Water reignited faith in the character. The film grossed nearly $325 million worldwide and reminded audiences what had made the series timeless in the first place: charm, optimism, and heart beneath the absurdity. Following the movie, Hillenburg officially returned to a creative advisory role for the television show. From mid-season 9 onward, his influence was immediately noticeable. The humor slowed down, the writing improved, and the characters once again behaved like themselves. Mini revival. Even the animation workflow got an upgrade. The show moved to full HD 16:9 widescreen, improving visual depth and lighting while keeping the playful, rubbery motion that had been missing for years. Backgrounds gained texture again. Spongy, painterly details that echoed the old Nickelodeon style. By 2017, SpongeBob SquarePants had quietly regained respect. The comeback wasn't a return to the glory days, but it proved that with Hillenburg's vision guiding the tone, Bikini Bottom could still feel alive. Unfortunately, just as things seemed stable again, devastating news was about to surface. Hillenburg's illness and legacy, 2017 to 2018. In 2017, Steven Hillenburg made a public announcement that stunned the animation world. He had been diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, a rare progressive neurodegenerative disease that slowly attacks the nerve cells controlling muscles. There's no known cure. Over time, it causes paralysis, speech loss, and eventually respiratory failure. Despite the diagnosis, Hillenburg didn't retire. In fact, he insisted on continuing his work on SpongeBob SquarePants for as long as his health would allow. Colleagues later said that even as his physical strength faded, his creativity and humor remained untouched. He worked through story meetings, contributed to scripts, and helped steer the 12th season's direction. This period of production had a quiet but powerful atmosphere. Everyone on the team knew what was happening, yet Hillenburg never wanted sympathy. His focus was always on maintaining the show's quality and protecting the characters he'd built. To the animators, it felt like he was trying to ensure SpongeBob's soul would survive. One Hillenburg himself might have viewed with mixed feelings. The post-Hillenburg era and expansion, 2019 to 2022. After Steven Hillenburg's death, Nickelodeon found itself in an unusual position. The creator was gone, yet his most valuable property was still one of the biggest franchises in animation. The network made a clear decision. SpongeBob SquarePants would continue, but it would also evolve into a larger universe. The first major project of this new phase was the SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run, released in 2020, beyond the main series. That same year, Nickelodeon launched The Patrick Star Show, another spin-off built as a surreal parody of late-night television. It featured Patrick hosting his own talk show from his family's living room, an idea Hillenburg had famously opposed years earlier, saying a Patrick spin-off would be too much. Despite his concerns, the series went ahead, showing Nickelodeon's intent to keep SpongeBob's brand alive through new formats and demographics. Behind the scenes, Nickelodeon also signed a $200 million partnership with Netflix, granting them rights to develop future spin-offs, including a proposed Squidward-centric project. Combined with the ongoing main series, SpongeBob was now less of a single cartoon and more of a multimedia ecosystem spanning television, film, stage, and digital platforms. By 2022, SpongeBob had existed in nearly every form of animation imaginable: hand-drawn, digitally inked, stop-motion, hybrid live-action, and now fully 3D CGI. His design had been refined, softened, and reshaped countless times. But the personality remained familiar: optimistic, naive, unshakably positive. Even without Hillenburg's guiding hand, SpongeBob endures, a yellow sponge who somehow outlasted nearly every cartoon of his era. The franchise may continue to mutate, but its essence still floats beneath the surface: laughter, absurdity, and the strange sincerity of a sponge in a tie, living under the sea. The modern era, 2022 to 2025. From 2022 onward, SpongeBob SquarePants entered its next evolution, one defined by experimentation, expansion, and longevity. Few animated series ever reach. While most cartoons from the late 90s have faded, SpongeBob continues to reinvent himself without losing his bright, square edges. The 14th season of the show was announced in early 2022 and began airing in late 2023, eventually concluding in December 2024. This run pushed the series past the 300-episode milestone, cementing its place among the longest-running animated shows in television history. The animation style during this period leaned even more into high-definition smoothness. Bolder outlines, deeper lighting effects, and subtle 3D flourishes layered into traditionally 2D scenes. Nickelodeon used these years to push the franchise's boundaries with crossover events and spin-offs. In 2023, the hour-long special The Tidal Zone premiered, acting as a self-contained multiverse story linking SpongeBob SquarePants, The Patrick Star Show, and Comp Corral. Each segment played with alternate timelines and styles. A rare creative gamble that proved the brand could still surprise audiences after 2 decades. The biggest shift came in 2024 with the release of Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie on Netflix. It marked the first time another major Bikini Bottom resident took the lead role. The film combined live action with CGI animation, following Sandy on a mission to rescue her home from surface world scientists. It also reflected Nickelodeon's growing partnership with Netflix, designed to keep SpongeBob visible on every major platform. Then, in early 2025, Plankton, the movie followed.